Oh, I know that sound. It's time for the Beer and News Report. Hi, and welcome to the Beer News Report. Cheers. Well, the primaries are over, and it looks like it's going to be another Biden versus Trump election come November. So I thought it'd be fun to talk about how these two guys have similar policies. I mean, what? Are you insane? I know. Today's show is not going to win me any points with anyone, anywhere, and it's really going to piss off my friends, both Republican and Democrat. But remember, I said policies and not personalities. There's a big difference there. So just hear me out on this and let me show you what I'm talking about. Grab a beer, start pacing back and forth, and get ready to yell at the screen where you think I'm wrong, and let's start the show, right? Cheers. Now, how about we start with a big one, the federal budget and how much debt we are in. Biden is spending money like crazy, but what you might not know is that Trump spent $9 trillion in his one term. Biden hasn't spent that much yet. There's two ways to get debt. One is to increase spending, which is the way Biden's doing, and the other is to do tax cut, which was the way that Trump was doing. Here, let me show you in this example. Here is the American government and the American people. As you know, the government taxes the American people to bring in revenue. Let's call it $3 trillion. Then the American government spends that $3 trillion on services to the American people. Taxes equal spending, so there's no increase or decrease in the deficit. Now, if the government starts spending more than it taxes, then we get a deficit equal to that overspending. In this case, we are taxing at $3 trillion and spending at $4 trillion, so $1 trillion gets added to the deficit. The other way of doing this is to give a tax cut. So in this situation, the government is taxing at $3 trillion, but giving them back $1 trillion in tax cuts. But they didn't cut the spending, which is still at $3 trillion, so the deficit goes up by $1 trillion. In a normal government budget, we tax people to get revenue, and then we spend the revenue on things that people need, like military, health, education, and yes, infrastructure, but I'll get back to that one later. Now, if you increase spending, but you don't increase revenues, meaning taxes, then you go into debt. And, as I showed you, that's what Biden is currently doing. Now, if you keep spending the same but decrease revenues by cutting taxes, you also go into debt. So Biden and Trump took different paths, but the end result was the same, and that is that we're going more and more into debt. So that's the first one of the policy similarity. All right? Cheers. Well, since I've already brought it up, let's talk about infrastructure. When Trump was president, he said he was going to pass $1 trillion infrastructure bill. Here, watch this.
So we have to build roads, we have to build highways. We're talking about a very major infrastructure bill of $1 trillion, perhaps even more.
Of course, President Biden wanted to one-up Trump, so his infrastructure bill was bigger. But I mean, that always happens. It's just politics. So this is the second policy similarity. Now, what about China? Trump imposed tariffs on China, all the goods coming in, and most economists said that tariffs were bad because they raised prices to the consumer. But if they were so bad, why didn't President Biden cut them? He didn't. He kept them. In fact, he raised the bar by imposing a ban on advanced chips sales to China. This is seriously going to hamper their AI and military technology. And you thought Biden was soft on China. Cheers. Biden is spending like crazy and increasing the national debt. But this is no different from any other president. Even though President George W. Bush also spent money on 2 wars, Obama outspent him. And then Trump comes in and he spends more than Obama. And it just looks like Biden is going to possibly outspend Trump. So it doesn't seem to matter which party gets into office. They all like to spend money. So if someone says that they're going to balance the budget, don't believe them. This rarely happens. The last president to have a surplus was President Clinton. So Trump, he puts tariffs in on foreign products to make them more expensive, thus making domestic products look cheaper, hoping that the American people would buy more. This in turn would increase the sales of U.S. company products, and their businesses would expand, hiring more people, which would create more jobs. That would make the economy better, and that's how he's going to balance his budget. Biden took a different route. Now, he passed the CHIPS Act, which gave semiconductor companies money to expand and upgrade their technology. He also passed the Infrastructure Act, which gave states money to rebuild their roads, bridges, schools, and many other things. But all this money together is tied into building manufacturing in the U.S., and thus that creates more jobs. And when you create more jobs, the economy does better. So both methods were aimed at creating more jobs and making the economy better. I mean, it's the old tomato routine, right? Yeah. Cheers. Now let's talk about NATO. Trump was mad at the Europeans because they weren't paying their fair share into the military and expecting the U.S. to pick up the slack in their defenses. So Trump cut back on what the U.S. would do for NATO, and the Europeans complained, right? Trump was okay with letting NATO die if the Europeans didn't start chipping in, which they started to do, but rebalancing their budget takes time. Now, Biden gets into office and Ukraine gets attacked. And the Europeans know that if Ukraine is basically a stepping stone, right? Once Ukraine falls, then Poland or possibly Germany goes, or if they go south, then it's going to be Moldova and then Romania. This scared the Europeans into investing more in their defenses. They gave Ukraine their old military weapons and then bought or built new military weapons, and thus NATO got stronger. Yes, I know that the U.S. gave military support to Ukraine too, but I want to focus on NATO and how the two different presidents took different paths but came to the same conclusion, which is NATO got stronger. All right? We can all agree that's a good thing. Cheers. Then there's the pandemic in our healthcare system. Now, Trump passed the CARES Act, and CARES stands for Corona Aid, Relief, and Economic Security. This act cost $2.3 trillion and gave money to people, increased unemployment benefits, helped small businesses with their payroll, and gave money to states. Biden did the American Rescue Plan Act. This is basically an extension of the CARES Act, but he only spent $1.9 trillion. So he's basically spending $400 billion less than Trump, but again, doing the same thing. Critics have said that the unemployment benefits of these plans make it too easy for workers to stay at home and live off their current unemployment checks when there's a shortage of workers. So that part of the act has been modified. Now, other similarities, they both declined to sanction Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. They both support Israel. Trump moved the U.S. Embassy to Bethlehem, recognizing Israel, and Biden is sending weapons to Israel to help fight Hamas in their war. Both support the vaccine. Trump administration developed it, and the Biden administration is continuing to use it. Both are considered populists. They position themselves as champions of the average American. They both support the death penalty. I bet that's something you didn't know. Yeah. Cheers. And to be clear, there are differences too. Trump is against abortion and installed a very conservative Supreme Court. Biden is for Roe versus Wade and women's choice to an abortion. Trump supports the Second Amendment and opposes gun control. Biden wants to ban assault weapons and close the gun shop loophole, meaning there's no backgrounds when you go to gun shows. Taxes, Trump wants to cut them. Biden wants to reverse those tax cuts, but Republicans in Congress have stopped them. He also wanted to increase the size of the IRS, but again, the Republicans stopped that too. And it should be noted that Trump is currently being audited by the IRS. Biden wants to forgive student loans. Trump doesn't. Biden wants to increase the minimum wage. Trump doesn't. Trump dropped out of the Paris Climate Agreement, but Biden rejoined it. Trump withdrew from the WHO. Biden reversed that. Trump went to North Korea to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Biden doesn't even want to have a summit with him. Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. Biden wants to revive it. And finally, immigration. Trump wanted to put a ban on Muslims from certain countries immigrating here, and he detained illegals and separated children from their parents, and he wanted to build a wall on the Mexican border. Biden ended Trump's immigration policies and supports a path to legalization for undocumented immigrants. But that led to a flood of immigrants, and now the border states are shipping illegal immigrants to sanctuary cities. I mean, just ask New York City how that's going. Yeah, cheers. Well, as you can see, my beer is almost empty, and that means we're at the end of the show. If you want to contact me, I can reach at this email address. Today, I'm drinking Reality Check. And this is Pilsner by Moonlight Brewing Company. I thought this was appropriate beer because, this whole thing is a reality check on the two presidents' policies. As for this beer, though, it's pretty good. I like Pilsners, and this is a Czechoslovakian-style Pilsner. So it's light-bodied, it's a little sweet, but very smooth, and I recommend you give it a try. Well, I hope you didn't pull all your hair out and go hoarse from yelling while watching this show. If you did, click that like button anyways. Of course, if you want to get notified of new shows, you click that subscription button and then the bell icon next to it, and this will notify you when a new show's been posted. Until then, keep your beer cold and your interests hot. Cheers.